Hello, good evening, and welcome to these pertinent questions. Where are you joining me from, if you don't mind?
Hello.
Yes. Where are you joining me from, and where are you speaking from, if you don't mind?
Oh, mete hace. Ah,
Where are you speaking from? And the pertinent questions that I am about to speak is related to Africa. I know it's very pertinent. Africa are more likely to get a list of their problem resolved, and they're least likely to see they have issues. And this is pertaining to the Southern Cameroon questions. Uh, Southern Cameroon questions, many people might not know much except you have historical facts about Africa, and most especially the sub-Sahara West African region.
mm,
So Southern is one of those areas that uh, they have been seeking for a sovereign state or a sovereign identity. They were both former colonial territory of Great Britain, and the people of Southern Cameroon were deprived of their privilege to exist as independent nations. So the United Nations Resolution 1514 XV and 1608 XV, respectively. So the United Nations, let's begin with United Nations Resolution 1514 XV that is pertinent to these questions. What is United Nations Resolution 1514 XV? It's pertinent to decolonizations. When talk about decolonization, many people might not understand what I mean. It means that after the Second World War that ended in 1945, the Allied nations that defeated Germany and Japan and so many other nations, so a United Nations was formed. And the purpose of the United Nations was to maintain peace and tranquility throughout the world. So the United Nations was formed. So certain territory in Africa domain had under German. So those German territory were placed under the Allied nations. And the Allied nations, which means those that defeated the Germans, Japan, because there were two that were fighting. So Germans collapsed or Germans were overthrown, and so a United Nations was formed. And the purpose was to maintain peace and security throughout the world. So the people of Southern Cameroon, per United Nations mandate, was placed under the control of Great Britain. So the people of Southern Cameroon was under the control of Great Britain. And the United Nations Resolution 1514 XV specifically says those territory that were under the Allied nations be given their rightful independence. So, in follow this resolution 1514 SV, many nations were given their independence, and some of those independent nations, Nigeria, and some of the West African region, Ivory Coast, exception of Ghana because Ghana had its independence earlier. But in following the United Nations Resolution 1514, Southern Cameroon meet those criteria because one, They must have a defined boundary. They must have a territory. They must have people. And in this case, the people of Southern Cameroon. And they have a defined territory per United Nations Resolution 1608, XV. So the people of Southern Cameroon were deprived of this privilege to exist as a sovereign nation. I know many people are not aware of these key fundamental principles that I am enlightened. And so many people, when you talk to them about Cameroon, they say, oh, we know about Cameroon. But these detailed facts has never, and even in Cameroon as well, it has never been taught. And even within the Francophone itself, it has been deprived. And that is why up to date, the people of Southern Cameroon has been deprived. Of course, so now, and it is quite amazing that when it comes to Africa, they are least likely to have their problem resolved. So what then is the problems? The problem is clear because there is mineral deposit. France in particular is aware of this key clause that they have relatively no power control over the people of Southern Cameroon. And so what they anticipate is to use a proxy nation, La Republique du Cameroun, which is a colonial territory of France. So therefore, by indirectly finance La Republique du Cameroun, provide an opportunity for France to mingling in the internal affairs of Southern Cameroon. How did they do it? Now, let's look at West Africa in particular. You know, the people of Southern Cameroon is the first democratic elected government in entire West Africa, including Nigeria. So Southern Cameroon demonstrate the unwaveringly instituted a democratic form of government by elected a prime minister and peacefully transfer power. Well, in 1957-58, in meeting the mandate of the United Nations Resolution 1514 XV, the British government is obligated to meet those requirements. The British government, in order to meet this, because they said they need to prepare the people for eventual independence and prepare them for their own self-government. Now, let me be clear. Let me bring in a little bit of La Republique du Cameroun. You know, La Republique du Cameroun, till the present date, has not in every meet those requirements where they have an elected government. So, in meeting the criteria set forth by the United Nations, La Republique did have a party called the UPC. The UPC was a party in La Republique du Cameroun. So the UPC won majority in the House of Parliament in La Republique du Cameroun. So they were supposed to form a government because the parliament that was elected had 26 members of parliament in La Republique du Cameroun. So those members, so UPC was supposed to form a government. But because of the philosophy of UPC, La Republique, with the France, with its complicity, because France was an advanced nation and knew exactly what it is, implies with the UPC philosophy. So therefore, France chose a stewardship, and that stewardship is what known as Amadu Ahijo. Amadu Ahijo was a handpicked by La Republique du Cameroun, by France, and instituted as to form a government in La Republique du Cameroun. And so the UPC that was banded was banned by France, and France instituted its soldiers and started begin what became known as the guillotine. For so many of you may not understand what is guillotine. Guillotine is a form of execution that existed in France during the Louis the 16th, Louis the 18th, and Louis and Charles X of France. So those methods of execution were immediately introduced in La Republique du Cameroun when members of the UPC, 26 members of parliament, were being forced to execute by France with the complicity of the stewardship of Amadu. In fact, UPC was supposed to form a government because they won majority in the House of Parliament. They had 26 members. So in doing so, Southern Cameroon was not part of La Republique within that specific time. Southern Cameroon has its own government. And those members of government of Southern Cameroon, remember that Southern Cameroon was the first elected democratic government in West Africa. So the members of the elected government of the House of Assembly in the People's Southern Cameroon meet in Nigeria. One will ask me, why should they meet in Nigeria? That's a good question. So the reason is Nigeria was a vast territory that, with some other areas, that the British administrative authority, that's the British colonial master or colonial administrator, was based in Nigeria. Since Nigeria has a vast population, it was more effectively for the British administrator to reside in Nigeria. So the elected member of the Southern Cameroon will meet in Nigeria for the ongoing debate or discussion related to its formation of government. So what happened is that the people of Southern Cameroon elect its prime minister. And that was initially the first government of Southern Cameroon, and that was Dr. Endele. And the next prime minister of Southern Cameroon was Jongo Foncha. So, by meeting the United Nations Resolution 1608 XV, it was decided that the people of Southern Cameroon should vote in the United Nations vote. The United Nations vote, in which the one interesting about this, the United Nations vote of 1961, France specifically, because France has 14 nations in Africa. France specifically instructed its colonial territory, which means they have already a 14-member nation, to stand against the people of Southern Cameroon. Unfortunately, that did not go the way they had thought. 50, if I'm not correct, but I will clear that. At least, I think it's 52 nations, if I'm not mistakenly, voted in favor of the Southern Cameroon independence. And the vote of the United Nations is more than the vote that against the La Republique independence. The vote of Southern Cameroon is more than the vote of La Republique independence in 1960, because Southern Cameroon followed the subsequent year, which is 1961. La Republique was 1st January 1960. Southern Cameroon was in 61. In April 1st. And effectively, the independence of Southern Cameroon was to take effectively October 1st. And that is why today, the people of Southern Cameroon is celebrating October 1st as its Independence Day. That was supposed to take effectively. La Republique, January 1st was its own Independence Day that should have been honored and respected. La Republique deliberately and wouldn't celebrate it as its own Independence Day. So now, let's look at the people of Southern Cameroon. Why am I bringing this topic? Because there are continued La Republique military executing people of citizens of Southern Cameroon, despite the fact that we have all the various embassies in Africa or the various embassies in Cameroon. They are aware of these key facts, but they choose to ignore it. They choose to deliberately and not to disregard it. And that's why I put my point that when it comes to Africa, they are least likely to get their situation regularized and respected. Excuse me. So the people of La Republique are occupying the territory of Southern Cameroon. Anyway, let me clarify the point of the government. The government. So the people of Southern Cameroon was the first to have its independent, or the first to have a democratic elected government and peaceful transfer of power. So when Ahijo was instituted as a stewardship under France, but he was never elected. He was, until this present, since 1961 till the present century or the present date, even now that I'm speaking, they have not had any elected and peaceful transfer of power. First, Ahijo was in power for 25 years. And subsequently, you have what is so-called Paul Biya, who has been in power for 42 years old. You all remember that when he came to Yaoundé, when the President of the United States invited 50 African head of state to meet in Washington, he himself arrived in Washington and was not even aware that he was in Washington. And he was surprised to learn when he saw a demonstration. That is a president of a country. That is a president of a country that arrived in the United States and is not aware that he is fiscally in the United States. And so this gives this deplorable state of Africa, that we assume that someone should be at the helm of the enterprise, whether he's mentally coherent, whether he's mentally retarded, no matter ever the circumstances. And that's why you see more coup d'etats that is happening in West Africa. Because we have these people that they believe they are mandated to be at the helm of a government without the authorization or the people of Africa actually elect them. And that is because they are stewardship. They are stewardship of France rather than the interests of Africa. And so that is why you see these major coups going on in West Africa. And it's because the military is compelled by virtue of this frustrated population that believe that someone, okay, let's take for example Paul Biya. He is not mentally aware. When I talk of mentally, because there is what we call competency. Competency, which means you have mental capability to reason, to make sound judgment, to understand key fundamental issues, and especially running day to day of a nation. But he doesn't have that capacity, and yet he is a president. You see, this is the key, this is the point. You know, Facebook just, Facebook or Twitter just flagged me because, and that is why media are restricting people from expressing the truth. And that is why, because people are restricting the truth to be told, because they block this aspect of conversations. And this is what impact, and then it resulted to armed conflicts because people deliberately refused to accept the key truth and the truth to be told. And so what does it happen? People resort to armed conflict as a solution because they are restricting people, because once a problem is brought forward, it requires a sound solutions. So you cannot imagine that a female within the past 24 hours, she was pregnant. She was shot live by the military of La Republique du Cameroun. I mean, could you imagine that was your relative, that was your sister, a pregnant woman in a taxi was shot by the military of La Republique du Cameroun? So that's why I'm bringing this fundamental question, because it's imperative to understand. And now you understood why you see people choose arm in a conflict, because they have requests for a solution peacefully. But when it comes to Africa in particular, they're least likely to get their problem resolved. And that is the point that I'm bringing here. But they're flagging my message, stating that I am violating, I am speaking truth. And if anybody opposes the facts, then give me your rationale why you believe what I am saying is not truthful. The people of Southern Cameroon should have had their independence per United Nations Resolution 1514 XV. It's a United Nations document. It's not my document. I didn't vote it. It was the United Nations that voted. And it's pertained to the people of Southern Cameroon. So you can't flag me and tell me that what I am speaking is not truthful. Is this a United Nations Resolution 1514? It specifically states that those colonial territories that were under the Allied control be given the rightful independence. So why can't the people get their independence? Why should they be under a foreign country, La Republique du Cameroun? It's fact. It's a fact. It's a fact. So dispute the fact and give me the reason why you believe that the people of Southern Cameroon can get their independence. They should. It is imperative. There are 8 million inhabitants of the people of Southern Cameroon. As of today, as I'm speaking, there are 8 million people of Southern Cameroon. They are more than sovereign nation in Europe. So why should we be treating Africans differently and treat the others differently? So it is clear, it is fact, so there shouldn't be any squabble. The population of certain European nations are not up to 1 million, and yet they are sovereign nations. So why should the people of Southern Cameroon, someone will argue, they don't have, I know the British government initially argued on that point, that the people of Southern Cameroon did not meet the criteria. Of course, that is not true, because there is what they call the Queen National Provide Assistance, subsistence assistance. The Queen of England provides assistance to nations but the economic prosperity of the people of Southern Cameroon prior to the 1961 vote, their economic resources were more than the capital of La Republique du Cameroun. Remember that prior to 1961, you can go to the bank in Southern Cameroon territory and borrow 500,000 CFA. Whereas the same amount in La Republique has to be approved in France. So you can understand the concept in which I am bringing out. So the economic viability of the people of Southern Cameroon were stronger. The economic viability of the people of Southern Cameroon prior to 1961 was more stronger than the economic viability of the Republic of Cameroon in terms of per GDP capita. And yet, They remain slaves under a foreign country, La Republique du Cameroun. They remain a slave under a foreign country, La Republique du Cameroun. So why is it that when it comes to, in terms of Africa, it's difficult to get their problem resolved? It's difficult. So now, this is the clause in the United Nations that prevent nations to file for the case. They say you must be a member of the United Nations. And so because of this clause, it prevents, and when a conflict arises, there is no quick solution. And so it escalates into a brutal stage, and that the United Nations cannot intervene because of this clause. And France utilized this clause to block every other nation an opportunity to have their point or their voice to be heard. And this has impacted the society, and who are potentially affected by this clause, the Africa as a whole. The Africa as a whole. And so there should be an opportunity for the people of Africa to be able to express and have their voice heard. And especially the people of Southern Cameroon. It is very, very frustrating that myself, I cannot travel to Southern Cameroon territory because a foreign nation, La Republique du Cameroun, is occupying our territory. And factually, they have no prerogative authority over the people of Southern Cameroon. I mean, it is quite frustrating and painful. And that is why I'm bringing this attention for the rest of the world to understand why conflicts in Africa escalate into a bloody battle, because their voice are never heard. We've written thousands of documents to the United Nations. We've written thousands of documents to the UK government. We've written thousands of documents to the United States government. But yet, none of these are taken into considerations. And yet, so how do you resolve conflicts? Then now the question arises, what is the purpose of the United Nations vis-a-vis African in particular? Legally, there is none. And you can infer this continual questions has impacted many Africans trying to evaluate what is the relationship vis-a-vis the people of Southern Cameroon. Please, I know initially I didn't talk about it. So if you have to join me live in this broadcast, make sure you click the follow button. Make sure you click the like button. Make sure you click. So, because this is very pertinent. This is very pertinent. And very pertinent to Africa as a whole. And very pertinent for Africa in general. So for all of you that are joining live, make sure you click the follow button. Make sure you click the join button. Whatever it is, please make sure you do any of them. So it is very important that I'm bringing this message for the world to understand the impact when it comes to Africa. They are least likely got their problem resolved. So the people of Southern Cameroon has not got its independence. And that is why there's ongoing war. It has this is the 7th year this crisis erupted. Remember that the United States Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, specifically that the question of Southern Cameroon are one of his top priorities. And yet it is the least priority as I'm speaking since his confirmation by the US Congress. And so the people want an answer. It's not just the people of Africa that want an answer. The African diaspora, the one here in the United States and the one in the rest of the world, they want to see leadership. They want to see leadership within the United States. That people, it doesn't matter because they have the nuclear arsenal. It means those without nuclear arsenal can have their voice heard. And that is all about. Because if we talk about justice, justice should be universally applied to everyone, irrespective of social origin, financial status, military status, political status. Everything needs to be applied equally. But yet, the African are the least likely to be recognized, that those fundamental issues be dealt with equally. Because Southern Cameroon is 8 million people. It's more than those heterogeneous nations in Europe. And that is a fact. That is a fact. So how can the voice of the people of Southern Cameroon be heard? And that is why I am bringing this attention, that the people of Southern Cameroon need their voice to be heard. They need their voice to be heard. We believe in a rule of law. We believe in a democratic institution. We believe that the people have the voice, a government. But now one will ask, how did the crisis erupted? It's clean and clear. It was simple. There are certain key elements within a nation that if they raise a concern, the government should negotiate and form a solution. And this began what? The lawyers. Imagine the lawyers. The lawyers are the key member of the society. They stand for equal justice. They stand for the rule of law. And if these members of the society are demanding a reform, a change, then it is a prerogative of the government to meet with them and discuss what form of change is needed. And that is what the crisis in Southern Cameroon erupted. Instead of the government to sit and have an open discussion with this key member of the society, the government chose military options. And you know, military option and intimidation. Instead of sitting together and have an honest conversations, how do they want the nation to be driven? Instead, they use military as the option, because that's what African in particular, they will not sit down and discuss issues. I mean, Europe has figured this out. You cannot see Europe just engage in any war in Europe, because they understand that they have fought series of war. It did not resolve to any particular conflict, but rather sitting on the table and understand the other person's point of view could present them a more robust decision that will help build a solid. But Africa, because they work under the complicity in the background of some government, and that is what is happening. And that is what is happening. So they have a person that is working in the background. And that has created this more conflict. And so the people of Southern Cameroon simply want these fundamental questions answered. Anyway, I will be broadcast on this topic further. So I wish you all a happy and good evening. Thank you.